How They Croaked by Georgia Bragg. Charles Dickens. It was the best of times for Charles Dickens, the richest, most famous author in the 1800s. But it was the worst of times for anyone who knew him. Dickens was incredibly talented, but he was also a moody, dirt-phobic control freak. People described him as a human hurricane. He explained sitting down to work as writing my head off. Dickens felt like his head was coming off because he had a torrential chemical imbalance going on beneath his comb-over. It fueled his art, but it ruined every relationship he had. It wasn't his fault, and it's not what killed him. Blood flow logjams in his brain ultimately left him as dead as a doornail. At 12 years old, Dickens had a full-time job pasting labels on jars. By 17, he was a court reporter writing in shorthand. After he quit that job and became a real writer, though, the word short never described anything Dickens wrote. Dickens walked 10 to 20 miles every day before he sat down to write anything. Without spell check or a delete button, it was tough being a writer back then. Dickens had to stop to dip a goose feather quill into a jar of ink every couple of sentences, but nothing stopped him from writing a lot, and very fast. He published his first story at 21, and by the time he was 25, he was a successful and admired author. Ebenezer Scrooge from the novel A Christmas Carol is the most famous character. Scrooge is a mean, stingy person who doesn't like children. Dickens didn't have to do much research to get Scrooge just right. Dickens never said anything nice about his wife, Catherine. He considered his 10 children to be disappointing, expensive, and messy. If a chair was out of place during his daily inspection of their rooms, the wrath of Daddy Dickens was wacko. The kids were scared whenever he was around. Dickens gave them nicknames like Flaster Floby and Chicken Stalker. The kids' nicknames for Dad could have been Shut Your Word Hole or Get Over Yourself. But Dickens never got over himself. He burned 20 years' worth of letters he'd received, especially the ones about forcing his wife to leave their house and refusing to let the kids see her family ever again, because he thought only his side of any story was important. And as if he didn't already have enough dominance over everybody, he learned how to hypnotize people. When he got older, Dickens traveled all over England and America by train, dramatizing his stories in theaters and playing all the characters himself. On performance days, he'd drink rum for breakfast, sherry and champagne for lunch, and then more alcohol for dinner. With all that liquor to drink, who couldn't play all the characters? But Dickens was having trouble just playing himself. Sometimes he would collapse onto his left side in excruciating pain. He had kidney stones, crystallized urine, that inched their way through the urinary tract and were about as painful to pass as giving birth to a ball of barbed wire. The prescription of the time was to hop on a horse and shake him loose, or if that didn't work, to drink a broth made from boiling baby animals. Other times, Dickens' left arm wouldn't go where he wanted it to, and it hurt so much he had to wear it in a sling. There were times when he could only see the right side of a room or words on the right side of a piece of paper, but not the left. Still other times, Dickens walked in circles when he wanted to walk straight. Dickens' doctor did a blood removal treatment called cupping to try and get him to quit circling around. The doctor used a tool called a scarificator with spring-loaded blades. He punched it down on Dickens' skin to cut evenly spaced gashes. Avoiding tendons or a vein was important. A glass cup with a suction bulb on top was placed over the freshly punctured skin. While air was sucked out of the cup, blood burbled out through the gashes. The doctor scooped up the blood and then made new crosswise cuts on the same spot to get even more blood. A cupping session left a field of bright red welts that lasted weeks. Things got worse when Dickens had paralysis of the motor functions of his left leg. After a while, the big toe on his lame leg got huge. It was gout, an excruciating, painful disease people get from living too large on rich food and alcohol. The pain of gout feels something like a shark taking a bite out of your toe. But Dickens' doctors thought all his problems were caused by too many bumpy train rides. They told him to stop performing, and his managers shortened the engagement tours. But no one got away with telling Dickens what to do. He told off his manager, throwing a raging fit that no one ever forgot. Even though he was partially paralyzed, walking in circles, and unable to see half of what he was looking at, Dickens was still able to write. No problem. That's because different parts of the brain do different things. If the left side of the body isn't working, it's the right side of the brain that's got a problem. The part of Dickens' brain that made up stories was working just fine. He never had creative paralysis. Still touring, Dickens would show off, bow, wait for more applause, and limp off stage and collapse. Now he kept a doctor, whom he didn't listen to, in the wings at every show. When he forgot how to say Pickwick Papers, the name of his first book, his doctor finally told him to go home. When Dickens returned, the house was all but empty. One unmarried daughter was still living at home, but the rest had already left. His wife had moved away 15 years before. Not that he cared. His wife's sister had stayed behind, though, most likely because she was on his payroll. One night at dinner, Dickens jibber-jabbered a bunch of words that didn't fit together. His word magic was gone. Then he fell to the floor. The other part of his brain was shutting down. He was cold and didn't budge all night. The doctors came and tried to warm him up with hot bricks. Charles Dickens died that night, June 9th, 1870. He was 58 years old. Dickens' human hurricane personality would now be diagnosed as manic depressive illness. It's a disorder that never gets better on its own. With the proper medication, it is manageable today for millions of people. His doctors didn't understand it at the time, but his left side didn't work because he had what is known today as a stroke. Dickens had many strokes. Uncontrollable bleeding in Dickens' brain is what killed him. He made a lovely corpse. So lovely, the artist Sir John Everett Malleus came to do a deathbed drawing of him. Before he could begin, he needed to tie Dickens' mouth shut. Maybe Dickens had one more story to tell, or one more person to tell off.